Hello, everybody. This is Timar's Two Worlds by Mór Jókai. Book 1, The St. Barbara. Chapter 1, The Iron Gate. A mountain chain, pierced through from base to summit, a gorge 4 miles in length, walled in by lofty precipices. Between their dizzy heights, the giant stream of the old world, the Danube. Did the pressure of this mass of water force a passage for itself, or was the rock riven by subterranean fire? Did Neptune or Vulcan, or both together, execute this supernatural work which the ironclad hand of man scarce can emulate in these days of competition with divine achievements? Of the rule of the one deity traces are visible on the heights of the Fruscagora, in the fossil seashells strewn around, in the Veterani's cave with its petrified relics of saurian monsters of the deep. Of the other god, the basalt of Pietra Detonata bears witness, while the man of the iron hand is revealed by long galleries hewn in the rock, a vaulted road, the ruined piers of an immense bridge, the tablets sculptured in bas relief on the face of the cliff, and by a channel 200 feet wide, hollowed in the bed of the river through which the largest ships may pass. The Iron Gate has a history of 2,000 years. 4 nations, Romans, Turks, Romanians, and Hungarians, have each in turn given it a different name. We seem to approach a temple built by giants, with rocky pillars, towering columns, and wonderful colossi on its lofty frieze, stretching out in the perspective of 4 miles, and as it winds, discovering new domes with the other groups of natural masonry and other wondrous forms. One wall is smooth as polished granite, red and white veins zigzagging across it like mysterious characters in the handwriting of God. In another place, the whole face is rusty brown, as if of solid iron. Here and there, the oblique strata suggest the daring architecture of the Titans. At the next turn, we're met with the portal of a Gothic cathedral, with its pointed gables, its clustered basaltic columns. Out of the dingy wall shines now and again a golden speck like the glimpse of the Ark of the Covenant. There sulphur blooms, the oreflower, but living blossoms also deck the crags. From the crevices of the cornice hang green festoons. These are great foliage trees and pines, whose dark masses are interspersed with frost-flecked garlands of red and gold. Now and then, the mouth of some valley makes a break in the endless dizzy precipice and allows a peep into the hidden paradise untrodden by man. Here, between 2 cliffs lies the deep shadow, and into this twilight shines like a fairy world the picture of a sunny vale, with a forest of wild vines whose small red clusters lend color to the trees, and whose bright leaves weave a carpet below. No human dwelling is visible. A clear stream winds along, from which deer drink fearlessly. Then the brook throws its silver ribbon over the edge of the cliff. Thousands pass by the valley, and each one asks himself who lives there. Then follows another temple more huge and awful than the first, the towering walls drawing closer by 300 yards and soaring 3,000 feet into the sky. That projecting needle at the top is the Gropa Lui Petro, the grave of St. Peter. The 2 gigantic forms on either side are his apostolic companions. Yonder monster opposite is the Babile, and the one which closes the vista is the Golombokcha Mali, or Dove Rock, while the gray pinnacle which towers above is the high robber's peak, Rozbojnik Veliki. Between these walls flows the Danube in its rocky bed, the mighty mother stream, accustomed far above on the Hungarian plains to flow with majestic quiet in a bed 3 miles wide, to caress the overhanging willows, to look on blooming meadows and play with chattering mills, is here confined in a pass only 150 fathoms in width. With what rage it rushes through! He who traveled with it before recognizes it no longer. The grisly giant is rejuvenated into heroic youth. Its waves leap along the stony bed, from which sometimes a great boulder projects like a witch's altar, the huge Babagay, the crowned Kasan. On this it bursts with majestic fury, roaring round it with swirls which hollow deep abysses in the bottom. Thence it rushes, hissing and seething, across the slabs of rock which stretch obliquely from side to side of the channel. In many places it's already mastered the obstacles which barred its way, and flows foaming through the open breach. There it's burrowed beneath the wall of the ravine, and by its continuous current has washed out a channel below the overhanging rock. Here, its carved islands out of stubborn granite, new creations to be found on no chart, overgrown with wild bushes. They belong to no state, neither Hungary, Turkey, nor Serbia. They're ownerless, nameless, subject to no tribute outside the world. And there again it's carried away an island with all its shrubs, trees, huts, and wiped it from the map. The rock and islets divide the stream, which between Ograndina and Plesivisovica has a speed of 10 miles an hour, into many arms, and the sailor has need to study these intricate and narrow passages, for there's but one deep-water channel through the rocky bed. Inshore, none but the smallest boats can float. Among the small islands, between the lesser branches of the Danube, singular constructions of human hands are mingled with the grand works of nature, double rows of palisades made of strong trunks of trees, which, joined in the form of a V, present their open side downstream. These are the sturgeon traps. The marine visitors swim upstream into the snare and on into the ever-narrowing trap, for it's not their custom to turn back until they find themselves in the death chamber from which there's no release. The voices of this sublime region are superhuman, a perpetual universal tumult, so monotonous, so nearly akin to silence, and yet so distinct, as if it uttered the name of God. How the great river dances over the granite shores, how it scourges the rocky walls, bounds against the island altars, dives rattling into the whirlpool, pervades the cataract with harmony. The echo from the mighty cliffs raises this eternal voice into the waters, into an unearthly melody, like organ notes and thunder dying away. Man is silent, as if afraid to hear his own language amidst this song of Titans. Sailors communicate by signs, and the fisherman's superstition forbids talking here under a penalty. The consciousness of danger impels all to silent prayer. At any time, the passage between these dark precipices, towering on either hand, might give the sensation of being ferried along under the walls of one's own tomb, but what must it be when the supreme terror of the sailor, the Bora, sweeps down, a continuous and ever-increasing gale, which at certain seasons makes the iron gate impassable? If there were only one cliff, it would be a protection from the wind, but the draught of air continues between the two is as capricious as the winds of the streets of a town. At each corner it takes a new departure. Now it stops suddenly, then bursts out of a corner as if from an ambush, seizes the ship, carries it away the steering gear, throws the whole towing beam into the water, then shifts again, that drives the wooden vessel before it as though it were going downstream. The water throwing up clouds of spray as blinding and fine as the sand of the desert in a simoom. At such times the sighing church music of the gale swells to the thunder of the Last Judgment, in which is mingled the death cry of departing spirits. At the time of which this history refers, there were no steamers on the Danube. Between the Galatz and the junction with the Main, over 9,000 horses were employed in towing ships upstream. On the Turkish Danube, sails were also used, but not on the Hungarian branch. Besides these, a whole fleet of smugglers' boats traded between the two countries, propelled only by strong arms. Salt smuggling was in full swing. On the Turkish side, the same salt was sold for 5 gulden, which cost 6.5 on the Hungarian shore. It was brought by contraband back from Turkey to Hungary and sold here for 5.5 gulden, so everyone profited by this comfortable arrangement. The only one not satisfied was the government, which for its own protection established custom houses along the frontier, in which the male population of the neighboring villages had to keep guard armed with guns. Each village supplied watchmen, and each village had its own smugglers. While the young men of the place were on guard, the old ones carried the salt, and so both trades were kept in the family. But the government had another important object in its strict watch on the frontier: security from the plague. The terrible Eastern plague. In these days we know nothing of it, for it's 150 years since a vain widow in Semlin brought an infected shawl and fell dead as she went to church in it, but we have to thank the regulations which shut the door against it for this immunity, for each contact with a new people has endowed us with a new disease. From China we receive scarlet fever, from the Saracens smallpox, from Russia influenza, from South America yellow fever, and from the Hindus cholera, but the plague comes from Turkey. Therefore, along the whole bank, the opposite neighbors can only communicate with each other on conditions of observing strict preventative measures, which must add considerable interest to their daily life. If the plague breaks out in Brussa, everything living or dead is officially declared infected. Whoever's been in contact with it comes under the same ban and must be in quarantine for 10 or 20 days. If the cable of the left bank ship touches the cable of the right bank vessel, the whole crew of the former is unclean, and she must lie for 10 days in the middle of the stream. For the plague might pass along the ropes from one to the other and be communicated to the whole crew. And all this is carefully watched. On each ship sits an official called a purifier. Oh, a terrible person, whose duty it is to keep an eye on everyone, and what he handles, what touches him. And if a passenger had been in contact with any person or any material of hair, wool, or hemp on the Turkish side, for these substances carry infection, even with the hem of his garment, the health officer must declare him under suspicion, and on arrival at Orsova must drag him by the arms of his family and deliver him over to quarantine. Woe to the purifier if he should conceal a case. For the slightest neglect, 15 years' imprisonment is the penalty. It would appear, however, that smugglers are not liable to the plague, for they have no purifier on board, and if the disease should break out 100 times over in Brussa, they would still ply day and night between the two banks. We must remember, however, that St. Procopius is their patron. Only the Bora disturbs their retail trade, for the swift current through the iron gate drives the rowing boats toward the southern shore. Of course, smuggling's done by towboats, too, but that belongs to the wholesale traffic, costs more than friendly business, and is not for poor people. In them, not only salt, but also tobacco and coffee are smuggled across the frontier. The Bora swept the Danube clear of vessels, and has thereby so raised public morality and obedience to law that for the last few days there's been no occasion of forgiveness of sins. Every vessel's hastened into harbor, or cast anchor in midstream, and the watchmen can sleep in peace as long as this wind makes the joints of their wooden huts creak. No ship can travel now, and yet the corporal of the Ograndina watch-house has a fancy that ever since daybreak, amidst the blustering wind and roaring waters, he can detect the peculiar signal tones which the speaking trumpet sends for many miles, which are not drowned even by the voice of thunder. The haunting, mournful blasts which issue from the long wooden tube. Is some vessel declaring its approach, so that no other ship may meet it in such weather in the narrow channel of the iron gate? Or is it in danger and calling for help? The ship approaches. It's an oaken vessel of 10 to 12,000 measures burden, deeply laden it would appear, for the waves wash over the bulwarks on either side. The massive hull's painted black, with a white bow, which ends in a long, upstanding spiral beak plated with a shining tin. The upper deck shaped like a roof, with narrow steps up to it and a flat bridge leading from one side to the other. The forward part of the raised deck ends in a double cabin, containing 2 rooms with doors to the right and left. The third wall of the cabin shows 2 small windows which green-painted shutters, and in the space between them the maidenly form of the martyred St. Barbara is painted on a gold ground, with a pink dress, light blue mantle, red headdress, and white lily in her hand. In the small space between the cabins and the thick coils of rope on the prow of the ship stands a long green wooden trough filled with earth, in which lovely blooming carnations and stalks are planted. A 3-foot iron railing shuts in the little garden, and its spike hang garlands with wild flowers. In the middle burns a lamp in a red glass globe, near to which is a bundle of dried rosemary and consecrated willow catkins. On the forepart of the vessel stands the mast, to whose center rings the tow ropes attached. The 3-inch cable, by which 32 horses on the bank are trying to move the heavy ship upstream. At other times, 16 horses would have sufficed here, but on the upper reaches, 12 would be enough. But in this part, and against such wind, even the 32 find it hard work. The horn signals are for the leader of the team drivers. The human voice would be powerless here. Even if the call reached the shore, no one would understand it amidst the confused echoes. But the language of the horn is intelligible even to the horses. From it, now drawling, now abrupt, warning or encouraging tones, man and beast understand when to hasten or slacken their speed, or when to stop altogether. For in this narrow ravine, the lot of vessel is very uncertain. It has to struggle with the gusts of furious wind, variable currents, its own weight, and the rocks and whirlpool which must be avoided. Its fate lies in the hands of two men. One is the pilot who steers. The other is the captain, who, amidst the roar of the elements, signals his orders to the towing team by blasts on the horn. If the signal is misunderstood, the ship either runs onto a rock, glides into the rapids, goes to pieces on the southern shore, or stands on some newly formed sandbank and sinks with every soul on board. The steersman is a 6-foot weather-beaten sailor with a very red face, whose color on both cheeks comes from a network of veins which the white of his eyes is also transfused. He's always hoarse, and his voice knows only two variations, either a loud bellow or a low growl. Probably this is what obliges him to take double care of his throat, prevention by means of a red comforter tightly wound round his neck, and cure by means of a brandy flask occupying a permanent position in his coat pocket. The captain is a man of about 30, fair hair, dreamy blue eyes, and a long mustache, the rest of his face clean-shaven. He is of middle height, and gives an idea of delicacy. With his impression his voice accords, for when he speaks softly, it's like a woman's. The steersman's called Johann Fabula. The name of the captain is Michael Timar. The official purifier sits on the edge of the rudder bench. He's drawn a hood over his head so that only his nose and mustache appear. Both are red. History's not recorded his name, at present he's chewing tobacco. One of the ship's boats, manned by 6 rowers, has taken out a line from the bow, in the united effort of the oarsmen materially assisting the towing of the vessel. At the door of the double cabin sits a man of 50, smoking a Turkish chibok. His features are oriental, with more of the Turkish than the Greek type. His dress, with the striped kaftan and red fez, is like a Serbian or Greek. It will not escape an attentive observer that the shaven part of his face is light in contrast to the rest, which in the case with a person who has lately removed a thick beard. This is Euthymio Tricalis, under which name he appears in the way-book. He is the owner of the cargo, but the ship itself belongs to a merchant of Comorn called Athanasius Brazovics. Out of one of the cabin windows looks the face of a young girl, and so becomes a neighbor of St. Barbara. One might fancy it was another sacred picture. The face is not pale, but white, the inherent whiteness of marble or natural crystal. As an Abyssinian is born black and a Malay yellow, so is this girl born white. No other tint disturbs the delicate snow. On this face neither the breath of the wind nor the eye of the man calls up a blush. She's certainly only a child, hardly more than 13, but her figure's tall and slender, her face calm as if hewn out of alabaster, with severely antique lines, as if her mother had looked always at the Venus of Milo. Her thick black hair had a metallic gleam like the plumage of a black swan, but her eyes are dark blue. The long, delicate eyebrows almost meet over the brow, which gives her face a curious charm. It's as if these arching brows formed a black aureole around the brow of the saint. The girl's name is Timea. These are the passengers of the St. Barbara. When the captain lays his speaking trumpet aside, and he has tried with the lead what water the ship has under her, he has time to chat with the girl as he leans against the iron railing round the picture. Timea understands only modern Greek, which the captain can speak fluently. He points out to her the beauties of the scenery, its grim, cruel beauties. The white face, the dark blue eyes remain unchanged, and yet the girl listens with fixed attention. But it seems the captain as if these eyes gave their thoughts not so much to him as to the stalks which grow at St. Barbara's feet. He breaks off on one and gives it to the child that she may listen to what the flowers tell. The steersman sees this, away there by the tiller, and it displeases him. "You'd do better," he growls in a voice like the rasping of file, "instead of plucking the saint's flowers for the child, to burn the holy willow wand at the lamp. For if the Lord drives us on to these stone monsters, even his own son won't save us. Help, Jesu." This aspiration would have been uttered by Johann Fabula, even if he were alone, but as the purifier sat close by, there followed this dialogue. "Why must the gentry pass the iron gate in such a storm?" "Why?" answered Johann Fabula, who did not forget this laudable habit of aiding the collection of his thoughts by the gulp of a wicker brandy flask. Why? For no other reason than being in a hurry. 10,000 measures of wheat are in our hold, and in the Banat the crops failed. The Wallachia, there is a good harvest. This is Michaelmas. If we don't make haste, November will be upon us, and we shall be frozen in. And why do you think the Danube will freeze in November? I don't think. I know. The Comorn calendar says so. Look in my berth, it hangs by my bed. The purifier buried his nose in his hood and spat his tobacco juice into the Danube. Don't spit into the water in such weather as this. The Danube won't bear it, but what the Comorn calendar says is true as gospel. 10 years ago it prophesied the frost would set in November. So I started at once to get home with my ship, and then, too, I was in the St. Barbara. The others laughed at me, but on the 23rd of November cold set in, and half the vessels were frozen in. Some at Apathen, others at Foldvar. Then it was my turn to laugh, help Jesu. Hard over he. The wind was now dead ahead. Thick ropes of sweat ran down the steersman's cheeks as he struggled to get the tiller over, but he asked for no help. Then he rewarded himself with a pull of his bottle, after which his eyes looked redder than ever. Now, if the Lord will only help us to pass the stone pier, groaned he in the midst of his exertions. Pull away, you fellows there, if only we get by this point. There's another beyond. Yeah, and then a third, and a 13th, and we must keep our mass money ready in our mouths, for we're walking over our open coffins all the time. Hark ye, my good friend, said the purifier, taking his plug out of his mouth. I fancy your ship carries something besides wheat. Master Fabula looked askance at the purifier under his hood, and shrugged his shoulders. What's that to me? If there's contraband on the ship at any rate, we shan't stop in quarantine. We shall get on pretty quick. How so? The steersman made a circle with his thumb behind his back, on which the health officer burst out laughing. Could he possibly have understood the pantomime? Now, look you, said Johann Fabula, since I was here last, the course of the river is altered. If I don't let her go a bit free, we shall get into a new eddy which is formed on the Lover's Rock. Do you see that devilish monster which keeps swimming close to us? That's an old sturgeon. He must be at least 500 weight. If this beast keeps up with us, he'll bring us ill luck. Help, Lord, if he only could come near enough for me to get the grappling iron into him. The skipper's always sneaking up to the Greek girl instead of blowing his horn to the riders. She brings us misfortune. Since she's been bored, we've nothing but north wind. There's something wrong with her. She's as white as a ghost, and her eyebrows grow together like a witch's. Herr Timar, blow the teamsman. Ho, ho, ho. But Timar didn't touch the horn, and went on telling legends of the rocks and waterfalls to the White Maiden. Beginning from the Iron Gate up to Glycera, each valley, each cave on both banks, every cliff island, and every eddy in the stream has a history, a fairy tale, a legend, or an adventure with brigands, of which books or sculptured inscriptions or national songs or fisher folks' tradition tell the story. It's a library in stone. The names of the rocks are lettered back to the volumes, and he who knows how to open them may read the romance therein. Michael Timar had long been at home with this library. With the vessel committed to his charge, he had often made a passage of the Iron Gate, and every stone and island was familiar to him. Possibly he had another object with his legends and anecdotes besides the satisfaction of the girl's curiosity. When a highly strung creature has to pass through a great danger, which makes even the strong man's heart quake, then those who know the danger try to turn the attention of the ignorant person into the kingdom of marvels. Was it perhaps thus? Timea listened to the story of the hero Mirko, with his beloved, the faithful Milieva, how they fled to the peaks of the Lin-Bigaja river and into the Danube, how there he alone defended the precipitous approach to his refuge against all the soldiers of his pursuer Hassan, how they lived on the kids brought by the eagles to their nest on the cliff, cared not for the roar of the breakers round the base of the island, and felt no fear of the white surges thrown up by the compressed force of the narrowed current. Mariners call the woolly wave-crests the lovers' goats. It would be better to look ahead than astern, growled the steersman, and then exerted his voice in a loud call. Ha ha ho, skipper, what's that coming down on us? The captain looked round and saw the object pointed out by the pilot. The ship was now entering the Tatalia Pass, where the Danube is only 200 fathoms wide and has a rapid incline. It looks like a mountain torrent, only that this torrent is the Danube. And besides, the stream is here divided in two by a mass of rock whose top is covered with bushes. The water forks in two arms on the western side, discharges through an artificial channel 100 yards wide by which the large vessels pass up and down. In this part, it's far from desirable that two ships should meet, for there's barely room for them to pass in safety. To the northward lie hidden rocks where a ship might strike, and southward is the great whirlpool formed by the junction of two branches. If this should seize the vessel, no human power could save her. So that the danger which the steersman had announced by his very question was a very real one. Two ships meeting in the Tatalia Pass, with the river so high and under such a pressure of wind. Michael Timar asked for a telescope, which he had lent to Timea to look at the place where Mirko had defended the beautiful Milieva. At this western curve of the river, a dark mass was visible in the stream. Michael looked through his glass and then called to the steersman, "A mill! Holy Father, then we're lost!" A water mill was driving down on them. Probably the storm had loosened its chains from the bank. Obviously, it was without a pilot or oarsman, who must have fled to the shore, so it drifted blindly on, sweeping away the mills it met on its way, and sinking any cargo boats which could not get out of the road. How could they escape between Scylla and Charybdis? Timar said not a word of this to Timea, but gave her the glass, and told her where to look for the eagle's nest whose ancestors had fed the lovers. Then he threw off his coat hastily, sprung into the barge where the rowers were, and made 5 of them get into the small boat with him. They were to bring the light anchor and thin cable with them and cast off. Tricholus and Timea did not understand his orders, as he spoke Hungarian, which neither of them knew. The captain shouted to the steersman, "Keep her steady, go ahead." In a few moments Tricholus could see what the danger. The drifting mill came floating swiftly down the brawling stream, and one could see with the naked eye the clattering paddle wheel, whose width occupied the whole fairway of the channel. If it touched the laden ship, both would go down. The boat, with the 6 men still struggling against the current, 4 of them rowed, 1 steered, and Timar stood on the bow with folded arms. What was their insane design? What could they do in a little boat against a great mill? What are human mind and muscles against steam and storm? If each were a Samson, the laws of hydrostatics would set at naught their strength. The shock with which they touch the mill will recoil on the skiff. If they grapple it, they'll be dragged away. It is as if a spider would catch a cockchafer in its web. The boat, however, did not keep in the center, but tried to reach the southern point of the island. So high were the waves that the 5 men disappeared again and again in the hollows between, and then the next moment they danced on the foamy crest, tossed hither and thither by the wilful torrent, seething under them like boiling water.